Welcome to another episode of Off the Menu. I'm Vincent Franchini from Tumblr House, here with the Occidental Charles Coulombe.
Occidental. I like that. Occidental. It means Western. That's great. I mean, I'm in Europe, so it doesn't get more Occidental than that.
That's right.
Although, the opposite of Occident is Orient.
Yes.
Occident is West, Orient's East. You know what you call it when you have a group of American or European businessmen in Singapore or Hong Kong, and they're being tutored in the ways of the locals? You know what you call that?
What do you call that?
Orientation. It got the girls laughing in the secretarial pool not 2 minutes ago. They were roaring. And you don't think that's funny. They thought it was hysterical. Speaking of the secretarial pool, I have a question for you. Have you noticed Tara's lipstick?
A new shade?
A new shade? A new dimension. I know what you'd call it. Magenta, carnelian, azulian, I don't know. Cerulean, whatever it is, I have never seen that color on Earth. And the worst of it is she's got nail polish that matches.
It's pretty exotic, yeah.
I think so. Don't you have some kind of a dress code for these girls? I mean, they're all wearing skirts. They all look like they've stepped out of 1963. I think that's wonderful. But don't you have any sort of regulation on makeup?
No, it's pretty easy going when it comes to that. I mean, we let them self-govern, so to speak.
Yeah, I can tell. Have you seen Kitty? She's got these sort of raccoon makeup thing. I mean, it's like she's auditioning for Catwoman. Do you even look at the secretarial pool anymore? You don't, do you? They're not even people to you. They're not. It's okay.
I abide by the principle of subsidiarity, okay? And that means to each his proper place, right? And I am not in charge of the secretarial pool, Charles, okay?
Well, fine, but they work for you, and so you should have some care for how they appear. And what's with all the beehives and bouffants in there? I mean, I know you're looking for a 63 vibe, and you've achieved it. But don't you think that many beehives, that many bouffants in one place could, I don't know, spontaneous combustion or something?
Gosh, it sounds like I'm more accepting than you, Charles. You sound like you got some beef with the secretarial pool.
No, I love the secretarial pool, but I mean, going in there, I feel like I'm 7 years old again or younger. I mean, that's the way everybody looked when I was a boy. Don't get me wrong. I have a certain amount of nostalgia for that era. I'm not saying it's just it's just odd.
Look, I don't go in there often. You wouldn't understand this because you've never gotten high up, Charles. But
I guess not.
One word: delegate. Okay, you've got to delegate your responsibility. It's called time management. Okay, time management.
You've got more important things to do than to police the appearance of the secretarial pool. Is that what you're telling me?
Police? Yeah. Police?
You want me to police? Forget
it. Wow, I have to police the women.
Well,
is that where we're going?
No, what I'm saying is you should simply have a higher regard, more lookout for how they present themselves. Oh, and one other question though, and I think they'll appreciate my asking this. Did it ever occur to you to give them computers in there?
What do they need computers for? I don't understand.
All right, look, I learned to write on a typewriter. Okay, fine. And the very first articles I ever sent in, we're going 30, 40 years in the past now. It's all on typewriter. But I don't know of a single office that doesn't have their secretaries using computers now. People don't use typewriters like that. I mean, even interoffice memos. Click, 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 click. This place is state of the art, except for the secretarial pool.
I think the sound of typewriters is very soothing. Don't you?
Yes, I do. Okay. But I noticed, too, that secretarial pool only has rotary phones. The only big office in the building with rotary phones. Where did you get those? An antique shop?
Very retro. See, we're building an organizational culture here, Charles. Okay, we're not just some, plastic, sterile, faceless company. Okay, we've got style going on. Okay, the style is a consideration. Okay?
Well, it's a beautiful style. I admit, I love the rotary phones. I love the sound of the little.
Yeah.
And I know that it allows the girls to take out their frustrations. When they get annoyed with someone they speak to, they slam the phone down.
Right.
And you can't do that with cell phones.
It's hard to do. Yeah.
You break your arm or something trying to do that. You certainly break the phone. But still, I don't know. But you're right. This isn't my business anyway. I'm not I'm talent. What do I know?
Yeah. So let's move on, Charles.
All right.
Enough of your griping.
Well, I'm being a voice for the voiceless. They are so fearful of losing their jobs that none of them would ever dream of talking about the conditions of the secretarial pulpit. None of them. But I'm a voice for the voiceless. See, I read Rerum Novarum and Quadragesimo Anno. I read the Papal Social Encyclicals. And you know what? Catholic social teaching should start in Catholic businesses. That's how I feel.
Well, we're applying Catholic social. You're the arbiter of Catholic social teaching now?
I wouldn't go that far. All right, forget it. Forget I said anything. I'll just listen to the click, clack, clack the next time I'm there. It is. I have to admit, on some level, it does make me feel better.
Good. Yeah, you of all people should appreciate the retro feel and look of the company.
Well, I do. I mean, sometimes it's better than watching How to Succeed in Business Without Really Trying. I mean, it just takes you right back to '63.
Oh yeah, I saw a little bit of that musical. Robert Morris and right?
Yeah, Robert Morris, great show.
Yeah. Okay. Well, let's move on. Okay.
All right, let's go.
Charles. So what's new with you?
Well, with me, not a lot. I'm still in Trumau, still trying to finish my Kaiser Karl book in 2 weeks, which is going to be hard, but I hope I can bring it in. Enjoying the weather. I'll be going to Germany and France mid-month. I'm going to Germany for my friend Axel's birthday party. He's turning 50.
Oh, wow.
Well, somebody had to. And then I'm going to go to a conference at Chavagne in western France, in the Vendée, with none other than Mike Church and Joe Pierce.
Oh, wow.
So it's going to be a gathering of the clans, so to speak.
That should be wonderful.
Yeah, I'm really looking forward to that. Plus, I discovered that only 45 minutes from Chavagne is a place I've always wanted to go to. Your brother went there at my recommendation. And I refer, of course, to the enchanted forest of Brocéliande in Brittany.
Yeah, I think he got lost in there, right?
He did get lost in there, and he never found the Fountain of Balanton. But since then, it's become more of a tourist trap. And so it's better marked. And also I'll use my GPS. So I have a better chance of finding it than he did.
Good. That's a good idea. Okay. Anything else going on?
Yeah, I think so.
Oh, sorry. Anything else going on?
Yes. Very important. Now, what I'm about to say is true for you and me, because we're living in the past. Our viewers are not going to see this until Monday.
All right.
Which is the 8th. We're here on the glorious 2nd of July. Why? Because the day that we normally would be doing this is a holiday. For you anyway, not for me. What is that holiday? It's the 4th of July. Independence Day. Yankee Doodle went to London riding on a pony. I am that Yankee Doodle boy. You're a grand old flag, you're a high-flying flag, and forever in peace may you wave. You're the emblem of the land I love, the home of the free and the brave. Every heart beats true under red, white, and blue, where there's never a boast nor brag. But should old acquaintance be forgot, keep your eye on that grand old flag. So there.
Love it.
I done pledged my allegiance. You bet.
Well,
I'm a Yankee Doodle dandy, a Yankee Doodle do or die. The stars and stripes forever. Columbia, the gem of the ocean. God bless America, land that I love. Stand beside her and guide her. Well, you get the idea.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Fireworks, barbecues, fife and drum companies in New England, and town greens with parades and iced tea and lemonade and straw hats and seersucker suits and summer dresses. And it's the 4th of July, for heaven's sake. Firecrackers, fireworks, skyrockets, Roman candles.
That's great.
All that.
Yes, these are things.
Yes. That's what's waiting for us for you anyway, in 2 little days. You see?
Yeah. Oh, that's great, Charles. Is there a point to this, or are we getting somewhere?
Of course there's a point. Of course we're getting somewhere. The problem is that the people who are watching this right now have already done that and are jaded.
Not if they're patrons. Patrons will get this early. They will get it before. But if you're not a patron, if you're a normal peasant or plebeian, you will be watching this after the 4th of July.
After the glorious 4th. Yeah. Well, that is sad. But there's something you can do in the quiet of your own home to make up for it, other than becoming a patron, which I think is a wise move. And I'll tell you what that thing is. You can go online and access American Heritage Magazine. Yes. This is a free ad for. They don't even know I'm making it. They never will. But I can't encourage reading American Heritage highly enough. Especially if you do so now, it'll be for free. Of course, it's free anyway. It doesn't matter when you do it. But anyway, there is an article called "The Glorious Unsafe 4th." That's the title.
Oh, by who?
I don't remember his name, but I've never forgotten the title. Just put the title in search on the American Heritage site, and it'll come up big as life and twice as beautiful.
Okay.
Unfortunately, none of the artwork shows, but you do get to read the thing. What a great description of the 4th of July in the Midwest at the turn of the century, the last century. Great stuff.
Yeah.
I love Americana.
Don't we all? Well, most of us.
No, not those who are ripping down statues of anybody they don't like.
Yeah.
Or attacking war memorials. Yeah. But if you're not a moron and you love the country you've got, then have a good time with it.
There you go. Okay. Speaking of patrons who are getting early access, as one does, we are going to add a new benefit for all Patreon members. Exclusive videos. We're going to do one extra video per episode for patrons only. Before the show, Charles, a lot of times he says something really interesting. I've always regretted not being able to put it on the full episode. But now with this extra video on the side, we have that opportunity to post some of those juicy tidbits that occur pre-show.
It's true.
In addition to that, we've already recorded this, so I can say we will have exclusive questions from patrons for that video as well. And so we've got the one we just recorded, we did 4 different questions. So there you go.
Think of it as kind of a speakeasy. A little restricted club. Nobody gets in or out. Where the bootleg booze is served. A class joint with class broads as the waitresses, as my father used to say. A really a hole-in-the-wall kind of place where, you got to knock on the door and say, Vinny sent me. That kind of thing. And then the fellow behind the door will tell you to speak easy. Shut the little hatch and let you in. And what waits for you? Well, maybe something even better than bathtub gin. We'll see. But you'll never know if you don't go in.
That's dead on, Charles. That's a perfect characterization. Okay, so let's unpack this a little bit. Let's unpack this. As a patron, you're getting exclusive content. You're getting early access. You're getting preferential treatment by Charles and me. And you become part of the foundation that is helping us grow this show. Oh, by the way, we're only like $60, $70 away from having 3 episodes per month now. So you can get all of these things for $1 a month. I think that's a pretty good deal.
Yeah, well, $1 a month.
And you young gentlemen that can't afford $1 a month, I highly recommend getting a job.
Yeah. Yeah, if $1 a month is beyond your means, ladies and gentlemen, especially gentlemen, I feel for you. I've been there.
Yeah.
Hard times, but I'd like to say the Tumblr House is hiring.
We are not. I was going to say that. Unfortunately, Tumblr House is not hiring right now.
Well, it's not hard to understand. There have been no deaths in the families of the existing employees.
Right.
I don't want to say there's nepotism going on.
No, you.
But have you noticed that like a 7th or a 6th of the secretarial pool call Agnes on Agnes? The boss lady?
Yeah, the boss lady.
Why? And apparently they really are nieces or something. There's a high percentage of Agnes's relatives working in that thing. Well, I am not saying it's wrong. All I'm saying is that admission into this company does seem to have some vague connection as to whether or not you're related to someone who's already working here. That's all I'm saying. I'm not saying it's nepotism.
There's an opposite correlation between success in Tumblr House and inquisitiveness. Okay.
Oh, yeah.
These past few days, a lot of inquisitiveness on your part, Charles. The 13th floor.
I said I wasn't going to talk about the 13th floor yet.
Yeah. So, just a little bit career recommendation, little professional advice. Just keep the inquisitive, stuff to a bare minimum, and you'll go far.
Yeah, to the 13th floor, probably. Oh, well. Anyway, don't you worry, ladies and gentlemen. I'm told that my job at Tumblr House is as secure as any other bit piece worker. Bit part piece worker. Unskilled. You actually, before your time, your brother told me that I had the same job security as Bob, the old shoeshine boy that used to be here.
Yeah.
He said I had just as much job security as he did. Where's Bob anyway? I haven't seen him.
I don't know. What did I just say, Charles?
All right. No, never mind. I don't care. I'm sure whatever happened to him, it was for his own good. I'll be good.
Okay.
Loose lips, stick chips, I know. What do we got in the way of questions?
Well, first memes and dreams.
Oh, memes and dreams.
Let's go. Let's start with the memes and dreams. This is I love this one. We've got pictures for those watching or listening to the podcast. We've got a picture of various British figures, famous British figures, laughing and pointing their fingers. It looks like they're laughing at us. It looks like they're laughing at America, Charles. What do you think of this picture? What does this picture make you feel?
Patriotic.
Yes. Why is that?
No, I'm sure it was issued for the 4th of July. I mean, every 4 years, the past, 10 years or 8 years or something, 12 years, every election, that meme that shows Queen Elizabeth saying that we're forgiven and we can come home now always hits. That and the picture of George III in coronation gear saying, "Miss me yet?" But I think all those are generated by Americans rather than the British, because the British have problems of their own right now that they're not laughing about. The first of them being Brexit.
Yeah.
You know,
of course.
How do you get out? When you're in a situation where the electorate voted on a measure that none of the career politicians want and are doing their best to torpedo without appearing to torpedo it? I mean, it's hard. It's hard. I pity the British political class. I really do. I mean, if this keeps up, gosh, yes. Yes. I mean, if this keeps up, the majority of the stooges will figure out they're constantly being had. Then the next thing you know, these guys will be unemployed. And they'll bring in, I don't know, the Brexit Party, who are filled with people who've never had political jobs before, don't know how to run people into the ground, don't know how to keep the people where they belong. Who knows what would happen? It's very disturbing.
What will happen? Is this a prediction? Wait.
No. I say what would happen. Who knows what would happen if that should come to pass?
Okay.
I mean, if Brexit, if they had an election today, the Brexit Party would win.
Well, it seems like, aren't you identifying a trend where it's like if things don't improve, this is what's going to happen? Isn't that the implication here?
That is the implication. But I don't. But as a Tumbler House, I don't want to give anyone the impression that I'm telling my betters what to do, because they already know, because they've done such a good job.
Smart. See, now you're thinking right. You're thinking, yeah. There you go.
I got my mind right. That's what it is. I got my mind right. But no, the truth of the matter is that whether they're Labour or Tory these days, they know best. That's why Cameron brought in gay marriage, what with him being conservative and all. See, British politics, like American politics, are perfect illustrations of that great commentator Bob Hope's assertion that no one party could fool all the people all the time. That's why we have two.
I love that quote.
And it's very true. And he was English, so he knew. People don't know that about Bob Hope, but he was actually born in England. He wasn't an American. He lived here most of his life, and he was certainly patriotic. He was a flag waver like me.
Oh, you old-timers.
That's right. We remember when the United States stood for something, and we remember when he remembered himself, and I remembered when everybody's dad had been in the big one, WW2. That's right. And you know what else? Back then, people knew what they were doing. In the immortal words of Archie and Edith Bunker, Mister, we could use a man like Herbert Hoover again. I'm talking about the real America. That's what I'm saying. Not this whatever it is we have now. And the sad thing is I'm only half joking.
Yeah, I know.
But I am half joking. I am half joking.
Yes.
I'm only half joking, but it is half joke. So you get to figure out on yourself which is which. Because I ain't telling. That's right. I ain't fooling because I need schooling because I don't know.
Okay. Sounds good, Charles. On to the questions, shall we?
Yes.
All right. First question from Nathaniel. Greetings, Charles, from a state of mortal sin, also known as New York.
My home state.
My state recently passed a law that would allow illegal immigrants to receive a driver's license. This was immediately followed by a couple county clerks refusing to follow the new law, which of course leaves me with questions about the church and civil disobedience. Faithful Catholics clearly have a duty to resist immoral laws, and especially ones that attack the faith, which all immoral laws do to some degree. But what about these more mundane issues? Holy Mother Church obviously doesn't have any rulings on when you can grant driver's licenses. Is there any teaching like just war theory to help guide the faithful's obedience to civil law, or is it left to the faithful's prudential judgment?
No, it's pretty much left to the faithful's prudential judgment. I mean, It's crazy. I've never ever heard of a jurisdiction of any kind anywhere granting illegal aliens driver's licenses. They tried it in California about 15 years ago. It was one of the things that got Gray Davis unemployment. If you remember when he was recalled, he had been pushing that. I mean, it's a crazy idea, but is it immoral? Not really. I mean,
isn't the word is prudential, right? Isn't that it's what is prudent?
Yeah, the word is prudential.
Yeah.
Yes, and I think it's very imprudent. I don't think it's immoral, but I think it's imprudent. I think it's unwise. But contrary-wise is the move of the county clerks in refusing to carry out the law wise. That's a prudential judgment. Unfortunately, I'm not a county clerk, so I don't have to make it. If I were a county clerk, would I do it or not? I don't know. And I'm just grateful I don't have to make that decision.
Yeah.
So that's about all I can give you on that.
What I always ask people when it comes to this is there any company or organization who grants people membership benefits who aren't members?
Very rarely.
I've never heard of such a thing. That sounds like madness to me. I don't understand. I don't understand how.
Well, they're virtue signaling. I mean, listen, the state of New York is in a race to the bottom with the state of California. You know, who's stupider? I am. No, me. I'm the dumb one. No, I'm dumber than you'll ever be. And so they keep racing each other.
We are the trendsetter. We are number one. We are the trendsetter, and I'm proud of it.
If California were that stupid, Gray Davis would never have been recalled.
Oh, well, that's...
Could Gray Davis be recalled today?
Ooh.
We've changed a lot in the past 10 years.
Ooh, that's a good point.
Yeah. The state has changed tremendously. We've had a lot of natives leave. We've had a lot of really of people who like the California of their dreams come in. We've had a lot of poor people come in for the benefits, and we have a state government that's really keen on spending everyone else's money. So I don't know. Apparently, we're getting typhus and whatnot amongst the burgeoning homeless populations in LA. You know, for a state government and a city government that is so compassionate and loving and helpful, they don't seem to be doing a lot for the homeless, other than creating this sort of Calcutta without a cow kind of setup they've got going in LA.
Yeah.
Can you imagine typhus on the streets of Los Angeles? I never, ever want to hear some moron in government yap about the Middle Ages again. They should keep their little mouths closed. I'd say put their nose to the grindstone, but when they do, they come up with more garbage. They should all go on vacation, see what happens. Anyway, to answer your question, as far as New York goes, it's a prudential judgment, and it's one I'm glad I don't have to make.
Okay. All right, next question. How barbaric was Northern Europe compared to Southern Europe before Christianity?
Well, it wasn't anything like LA today, that's for sure. But sorry, gotta get my mind out of the typhus in the streets. But it depends on how you want to define civilized. If you define civilized,
he said barbaric.
Well, yes, I realize, but it's the flip side of civilized. You know, you can't have the one without the other, and you have to define your terms. What is barbaric? What is civilized? If we're talking about technology, then Southern Europe was much more civilized. They had plumbing, central heating, writing, cities, government of a recognizable sort, organized life, whereas the northern barbarians were tribesmen. You know, they lived by the hunting and fishing and gathering, and if you're talking about morals, We don't know that much about the home life of the barbarians, but they appeared to have been pretty heavily heterosexual, which was not always the case in Southern Europe. They worshipped as many gods as the Southern Europeans did, so that's something. In some ways, certainly they were freer in the sense of more anarchic than the Roman Empire. I mean, ladies and gentlemen, there's always the question: is freedom order, or is freedom anarchy? That's hard, because if anarchy is freedom, then there's nobody to protect the weak from the strong. But if order is freedom, there's no one to protect the strong from the weak. So, hard to say.
Okay, well, in terms of civilized...
Okay, what? In technological terms, Southern Europe was much advanced over Northern Europe. Moral terms might have been very different.
What about civil rights? What about, I mean, were the Northern Europeans racist? You've totally skipped racism, Charles. I mean, that's not even on your radar. I don't understand. I mean, this is a foundational.
That's the foundation of our modern society.
Right.
Is the fight against racism.
You just skipped it totally.
Yeah, I guess I did. How many non-whites were there in Northern Europe before Christianity?
I know. See, that's the big question, right? There weren't many.
Yeah, they were all racists, I guess. There weren't any. All right. Southern Europe had a lot of swarthy people, Sicilians and people like that, and Neapolitans and stuff. Barese. Oh, I'm sorry, that came out wrong.
What do you mean? I meant
Phoenicians. I meant Phoenicians and Arabs. I didn't mean Southern Italians necessarily. I didn't, really.
Okay, you watch yourself, Charles.
I would ask you what's wrong with that, but you told me not to ask questions, so I won't. I do as I'm told, see?
Good.
All right, what do we got?
Okay, next question is from Jose. Oh, this is a long question. Okay, so I'll ask... He has several questions. I'm going to ask the whole thing, but then we're going to break it down piece by piece. Okay, here we go. As a young Argentinian growing up in the early 2000s, I was taught that Argentina's independence was the greatest thing that could have ever happened to us as a country. However, the more I learn about the actual history of my nation, the more I question the veracity of this historical narrative. So what is the actual truth about the revolutions and independence movements in South America, and particularly in Argentina? Was the Spanish monarchy really the oppressive and abusive force my teachers talked about? Was the majority of South Americans really in favor of these movements? Who were the loyalists, and what motivated them to remain loyal to the crown? How did the Indians in the church do after South America became independent? And finally, how did the immediate chaos after these revolutions relate to the Enlightenment ideologies of these independence movements?
Oof, that's a lot.
Yeah, we got a lot to unpack here. Okay. So,
well, for start, I'll just say, don't cry for me, Argentina. The truth is, I never left you. No?
Well, she is your relative. The singer being Madonna there, but...
Yes, that's true. That's true, but I think you'd rather, even though she's not one of my favorite people, I'm sure you'd rather hear her sing it than me.
Sure. Okay, so what is the actual truth about the revolutions and independence movements in South America and Argentina?
Woof! Well, firstly, Don Jose, you've got to remember that, like these United States, and I'm very much thinking of it in the build-up to the 4th of July, being the creation of a revolution, in order to feel good about ourselves, we have to constantly justify it. That makes perfect sense psychologically, but that doesn't mean it's true historically. Now, you've got to bear in mind a couple of things. One is that the Spanish crown, after the conquest, managed to control everything from Argentina up to California with a minimum of military might, a minimum of governmental presence, and yet they managed. That by itself is an accomplishment of administration unlike any in the world. It was an amazing thing to pull off. Now, unfortunately, the balance that they had achieved, and they had achieved a balance, you see, because Latin America was a very complex place. At the very top, you had the Peninsulares, who were Spaniards from Spain, and they were the higher officials. Under them, you had the Criollos, who were the native-born whites, and they held the lower offices, but they were also the very wealthy people. So often enough, their children would be educated in Spain and that kind of thing. Under them, you had the mixed Indian and white, the mestizos, and they were the bulk of the population. And then you had the Indians, the surviving Indians. The funny thing was, throughout Spanish America, they lived under their own rulers. They were not subject to white mayors. They lived under their own caciques. And some of the top of these people were actually Spanish noblemen. I don't mean they were Spaniards. I mean they had been given Spanish titles and were considered the equals of Spanish nobility. They still have them today. I mean, the Marquis of Oropesa in Spain is a direct descendant of the Inca. And they same with the Aztec emperors. They have descendants today in Spain who were members of the Spanish nobility. Anyway, so they were off in their own world. And then you had the blacks and the black slaves. And in addition, you had not all blacks were enslaved. And they had various gradations. The mulattoes, of course, were Spanish and black, white and black. The Zambos were Indian and black, and so on. And a lot of black slaves were liberated before the actual end of slavery, which was quite a bit later. And that's the reason, for instance, that virtually all of the settlers of Los Angeles had some black blood. And in your own country of Argentina, the black population, which was still in existence in, say, 1910, completely assimilated into the Argentine population. They just married other Argentines, and that was the end of them, which is something no less than your great fantasy writer, the Argentine fantasy writer, I can't think of his name. This is really annoying. Very famous man, I can't think of it. Well, doesn't matter. The Pope's very fond of him. Anyway, and he's a great writer in his own right. He's dead now, of course, for like 20, 30 years. But at any rate, he had commented on the disappearance of the Argentine black population through assimilation. Well, I mention all this because for most of that rule, it was very decentralized. I mean, yes, you had the king who issued orders. But for instance, let's say that local conditions, when a law came from Madrid, local conditions just meant that it wasn't going to work. He would send back a note to the king saying, I obey, but I do not. What's the word? I obey, but I do not comply, or something like that. In other words, I'm not being disrespectful. I'm not rebelling, but I'm sorry. I obey, but I do not execute. That was the phrase. And what would happen is that in such a case, the king would send an inquirer, a visitor was. And if the situation was as the local governor said it was, then that was it. It was fine. If not, he'd lose his job, but have to go home. But it was that fluid and that flexible a system, and it lasted for a long time. It supported the church. There was what they call the patronato, meant that in return, the bishops and things like that, the king had to support the church financially. That's why, for instance, taking California, Carlos III was the one who bankrolled Father Serra. No, people don't realize this. But when you say, oh, he came to California, he did this, he did that, that's great. How did he pay for it? The king. That's how he paid for it. You know, oh, and ships came and brought them this and such. Well, who paid for those ships? The king. So, and I'm sure you're not in Argentina, Vinny, but I'm sure you never heard that in your California history.
Right.
It just, it's not there. So when the Bourbon took over the throne of Spain in 1711, they began centralization, very enlightened, like, Joseph II. And that had some bad effects. Not horrible, but they destabilized things a little bit. And much more so did the abolition of the Jesuits, the expulsion of the Jesuits. That introduced a great deal of instability. All of that having been said, the Spanish regime was not at all oppressive. The cities pretty much ran themselves, and it was criollos who voted for the city councilors. They ran their own affairs. But what happened to bring about independence in Latin America was not this terrible oppression. No. What ultimately brought it about was that Napoleon conquered Spain. And for a while, there were 3 kings in Spain. There was his brother, Joseph Bonaparte. There was the old king, Charles IV, whom Napoleon imprisoned after he made him to abdicate. And there was Charles IV's son, Fernando VII. And he too was in prison. And in Spain itself, there was a resistance to the French regime. And that resistance was centered around a liberal group, the Cortes. So basically, you now had a situation where the colonies of Spain and the New World were in free fall. Which king do we back? And the Cortes and Napoleon would both send viceroys. Which one do we accept? It was under that situation that the criollos of Buenos Aires began the revolt in 1810. Now, interestingly enough, a couple of years earlier, they had resisted an attack by the British and were commanded by the heroic and brave viceroy, Dudenier, who was a Frenchman in the Spanish service. They beat the British, drove them off from Buenos Aires and Montevideo. But then in 1810, they decided to declare independence from Spain and from Napoleon's Spain and run the show themselves. That was the beginning. And with the example of the North American 13 colonies, this idea spread throughout Latin America. And you have the same sort of people that you had in the United States pushing for independence. These are people like Bolivar, San Martin, who already, for the most part, had the wealth and the power. They wanted it all, just like John Hancock. And so they went for it. Now, to answer your question, were Latin Americans for it? No. Who were the royalists in Latin America? Well, over half of the royalist armies in the war were native-born. And oddly enough, very much like the loyalists in the United States, what were they? A lot of them were Indians, a lot of blacks, a lot of poorer mestizos were royalists. Why? Because the further away you were in terms of class and income from the people who were trying to take over, the likelier you were to be loyal to the king. Now, mind you, like any revolution, like any civil war, which is what it was a civil war, a lot of who's went onto what side depended upon earlier existing arguments and fissures. So you might have 2 towns that had always been rivals. Well, one town declares for the revolution, so the other town becomes royalist. If you see what I mean. And the problem, of course, is that the rebels in Latin America were supported by the British and by the Americans. So this made it very, very difficult to compete. This was a problem that would face Latin American conservatives after the Spanish defeat. Inevitably, the liberal side would be supported by the British and or the Americans, and the native conservatives would be stuck with whatever they could put together on their own. So, in the end, Spain was defeated, and then the Monroe Doctrine was put in place to make sure that she couldn't reconquer her colonies. And although the United States declared it, it was actually the British Royal Navy that enforced it. The Monroe Doctrine was directed against Spain.
What about this last one, the last part of the very last question? And finally, how did the immediate chaos after these revolutions relate to the Enlightenment ideologies of these independence movements?
Well, it gave different of the fathers of independence the chance to kind of reinvent the state according to whatever their fondest ideas were. Generally, that reinvention didn't work out very well. So, for instance, Bolivar, who was made president of Bolivia, was also made president of Gran Colombia, which was the entirety of the viceroyalty of New Granada, Colombia, Venezuela, Ecuador, and Panama. But that broke up very, very rapidly. Central America, of course, which when Mexico, in the Mexican independence, I've got to tell you, it was very unlike the others. Mexican independence, you had a semi-popular revolt under Hidalgo, which began in 1810, but that was defeated. And the commander of the Spanish troops in Mexico was a gentleman called Agustin de Iturbide. There were still some independence people up in the hills, rebels, but they were inconsequential. And then in 1821 or 1821, you had a liberal constitution in Spain, which was anti-clerical, anti-Catholic. So Iturbide made a deal with the independence folk that Mexico would indeed become independent as an empire, a monarchy. And they put out what was called the Plan of Iguala, which had 3 points. One was that Mexico would be independent, it would be a monarchy under a European prince, preferably a Spanish Bourbon, be Catholic. That was the Plan of Iguala. Well, Iturbide went hunting for a prince to occupy the throne, and oddly enough, nobody wanted the job. So he took it, and he was made emperor of Mexico. And at that point, Mexico extended from California and Texas all the way down to Panama. But Iturbide fell afoul of the liberal elements in the Mexican elite. He was overthrown, and then he was murdered. The Mexican empire became a republic. When they did that, United Provinces of Central America, today Guatemala, Honduras, El Salvador, Nicaragua, and Costa Rica, all seceded from Mexico as United Provinces of Central America. But you guessed it, their elites couldn't agree either. And so they broke up into what you have now, into the little countries there. There was one other question he asked, and that was about the church and the Indians in independence.
Yeah.
And the answer is that...
Yeah, how did they do after... How did the Church of the Indians do after South America became independent?
Well, I mentioned to you that under the Spanish, the Indians had run their own show. And had lived in a sort of quasi-feudal status, separate from the main body. Well, the newly independent governments really couldn't take that. You know, in a monarchy, you can have a lot of varying kinds of establishments. But in a republic, everything's got to be cut and dried the same way. And that's what happened. The Indian autonomy of the various Indian regions was abolished. And they became simply citizens. Now, this happened in different ways and at different speeds in each of the countries, but it's what happened. As far as the church goes, it was a very interesting thing. Initially, the Pope refused to recognize the independence of the Latin American countries, and he didn't do so until 1836. Now, remember what I said about the Patronato, where the King of Spain, in return for supporting the church financially, had the right to make appointments, including to dioceses. Well, the newly independent countries, many of them, decided that they were the inheritors of the King of Spain, so they inherited the right of patronage, except they only took half of it. In other words, they liked the whole piece about appointing the bishops and so on. They liked that part. Supporting the church was the part they didn't like. You see. So they would do half of it. They would try to appoint the bishops and so on, but in terms of finances, the church could look after itself. It was free as long as it didn't cost anything. It was governed by the church, by the state, otherwise. So that system reigned in a lot of the different countries until later on it got ameliorated by Concordat within about starting in 1850 to 60. A new fad came from the States, and that was separation of church and state. Now, not all the Latin American countries have done it to this day. There are a couple that still haven't. And church and state are still connected. Santo Domingo, Costa Rica, Argentina, until relatively recently. Catholicism was in the Constitution, the religion of the state, and the president had to be Catholic. I'm pretty sure the president can be any kind of moronic thing it wants to be now. But I don't know about the religion of the state being Catholic. What I do know is that if you go to the section of the foreign ministry, the Bureau of Cults that deals with religion in Argentina, it's very, very pluralistic. It goes out of its way to be pluralistic. So anyway, there you go. That's what happened.
Okay.
What else we got?
Okay. Next question is from Andrew. Greetings, gentlemen. I was wondering if you could shed some light on the Auxilium Christianorum, started by one of Vinny's favorites and mine, Father Ripperger. Love everything I've heard about it, but there are some who say that praying the prayers could be dangerous for some or most Catholics, especially those with undeveloped prayer lives. These people say that demonic payback has occurred, and saying these prayers is like putting a bullseye on your back for demonic retribution. Should we be careful about the prayers we say?
Well, first I have to say I don't really know enough about Father Ripperger's order to comment on it. I've got a vague idea of what they do, and that's about it. I know about his exorcism work somewhat, and Vinny is a great fan of his prayers. But I can't speak directly to it. What I can say is that if you try to advance in holiness under any circumstances, you will put the bullseye of the devil on. Yeah. Many saints, I think of Saint Jean Vianney and people like him, got ferocious attacks from the devil because the devil doesn't want you to save your soul. And the closer you come to doing it, the more annoyed he gets with you. He doesn't worry too much about mediocrity, though. So you can certainly avoid his attention if he thinks he's going to get you in the end anyway. I don't think that's a smart strategy, though. But as I say, I'm not really in a position to comment intelligently about it, except to say that prayers work. Sacramentalists work. And if you have your holy water, you've got your St. Benedict medal and your scapular and so on, you ought to be fine, I should think. What do you think, Vinny? I mean, you've read a lot of his prayers.
Yeah, no. My all-time favorite books. I'm gonna Deliverance Prayers for Use by Laity by Father Ripperger. This is one of my favorite books. When people buy it, it makes me very happy. At one of the last parts of it is Auxilium Christianorum, which are prayers for this association. Now, it explains the principal aims of this association. One is to provide prayers for the priests associated with the Auxilium Christianorum, so that their apostolate in driving out the demons is efficacious. So and to provide prayers for the protection of the priests, members of the association, and their families and friends, so that they themselves are not affected or adversely affected by the demonic. So, I wouldn't stop praying, or I wouldn't stop praying these prayers that are designated for this association for fear of the demonic. In this book itself, you've got a lot of interesting prayers that perhaps people have never heard of before. I mean, the whole purpose, these are deliverance prayers. These are prayers to drive out the demons. And one of the interesting prayers is prayers to blind the demons, so that they don't know what's happening. I have it right here: binding prayer to blind demons. I'll just read it off just to give you an example of these type of prayers. Most gracious Virgin Mary, thou who wouldst crush the head of the serpent, protect us from the vengeance of the evil one. We offer our prayers, supplications, sufferings, and good works to you, so that you may purify them, sanctify them, and present them to thy Son as a perfect offering. May this offering be given so that the demons that influence us do not know the source of the expulsion and blindness. Blind them so they know not our good works. Blind them so that they know not on whom to take vengeance. Blind them so that they may receive the just sentence for their works. Cover us with the precious blood of thy Son, so that we may enjoy the protection which flows from his passion and death. We ask this through the same Christ our Lord. Amen. Mm-hmm. So if you're worried about vengeance, that's the prayer for you. But there are a lot of very interesting prayers in here. There are many different binding prayers. There's prayers of authority. There's a very powerful prayer, invocation of the entire heavenly court to help you. What are some of these my favorite prayers? It's severing ties, bonds, and attachments. If you've been complicit in some bad things, that's one for you. Here we go. Prayer to be freed from evil habits. Prayer to overcome our spiritual enemies. This is one of my favorite prayers. Prayer to overcome evil passions and to become a saint. That is one of my favorites right there. So this is such an important book. This is our best-selling book in our bookstore that is not published by Tumblr House, and I'm so happy and grateful that is the case. $14.95 in our bookstore. I just can't overstate this enough, and this is in tandem with Father. If you get this, I highly recommend watching Father Ripperger's videos on generational spirits, 3-part series. It's very important. Every person has a generational spirit attached to them, pretty much. It's kind of the counter to guardian angels. It's kind of the demonic counter. It's very important stuff to know. Get this. You owe this to yourself to do the math on this and figure this out. Look internally at your spiritual situation. Get yourself sorted out. Okay, this is a step to do that. Okay.
All right.
Yeah.
I'll take care of that question. What else you got?
Yeah. No. I just want to add. I was worried about this myself. We did a video on the Golden Dawn 2 years ago, and we got some feedback from Satanists. They were not too pleased with the fact that we were basically laughing at them, and I was worried that they're going to hex us. I said, Charles, I'm actually really scared they're going to hex us. And Charles very astutely pointed out, Vinny, we've got the brown scapular. We're good. So that's another good thing, too, that you just rest assured on. Get that brown scapular on you. That's protection from Our Lady.
The brown scapular, the St. Benedict medal, holy water is always good.
Yeah.
Get the sacred heart enthroned in your house.
Yeah, big one.
I just had that done here, by the way.
Oh,
last
nice.
Friday on the Feast of the Sacred Heart.
Ah.
I'm not boasting or anything.
No, of course not. Okay, so our last question today.
Okay.
From Connor Lynch. Mr. Coulombe, I am a monarchist Irishman, age 25, living in Republican Ireland. Marriage has been redefined, abortion legalized, borders opened, pride parades galore, all in the past 5 years. How can one find hope for the future in such times?
It was just as bad under Cromwell.
Yeah.
Just as anti-Irish. I mean, it's annoying that the Irish are doing it to themselves. I grant you. Well, there are several things you can do. For starters, very, very important, be sure to dig deep into your own prayer life. Go to Mass often. Go to confession. Say the Rosary. And do all the other devotions that you know and love. You're in Ireland, the island of saints and scholars. You have Lord knows how many saint shrines around. Go to the ones closest to you and pray for poor old Ireland. Now, you're a monarchist. Well, Irish monarchists, of course, come in several varieties, and I don't know which one you are. Some would like to see the High King restored. Others would like to see Ireland rejoin the Commonwealth in some way. Still others are Jacobite and would love to see the rightful king rule over the three kingdoms. Well, I don't know which one you are. They all seem like great alternatives to me. I wouldn't care which of them got in. But I can certainly tell you that in addition to pushing your own prayer life, you can always ask at all and sundry if the question of monarchy comes up. Wouldn't it be better to have someone who had a connection with Ireland? The Taoiseach is the prime minister in Ireland. Taoiseach is a Gaelic word.
I see.
It means I'm for sale. No, it doesn't mean I'm for sale. Stop it. I'm for sale. Do you think that the Prime Minister of Ireland could ever be for sale? What a horrible thing to say. Anyway, the church in Ireland is in very bad shape. If you can find a traditional mass to go to, do it. If you can't, find the best you can find. But you have Silverstream Priory. I know you've got a very good mass at St. Kevin's in Greater Dublin. I know because I've been there. Beautiful church. What was funny about that church is that it was completely renewed. It was restored to how it looked in 1870, about 4 or 5 years ago. And I was blown away. It's where the traditional mass is said regularly in Dublin. I was absolutely blown away because it looked utterly untouched. And I said to my friend's father, who's one of the people on the financial committee of the parish, I said, how did this survive? And he laughed and he said, it didn't. We went all over the place. We found the original plans. And he described me in detail what it had been reduced to when they took it over. And now it looks exactly the way it did when it was built in the 1870s, in the inside. It is gorgeous. And going to Mass there, it's like a taste of the old Ireland, the real Ireland, not to be confused with the phony one of gay Pakistani Taoiseachs and things like that. I'm not saying there's anything wrong with a gay Pakistani Taoiseach. I'm sure they're wonderful. But still, it would be better to have the High King or a Stuart King or a Catholic King or even a British king who was a king. Any of these would be preferable to what they have. But at any rate, Mr. Lynch, I'm very, very sorry for dear old Ireland. I've got a good chunk of Irish blood myself. And I have always enjoyed my visits to the Emerald Isle. I have a lot of friends there. It is a disgusting judgment on the church in Ireland that the greatest opponents of abortion are the Orangemen. While we're just sort of, I don't know. We've got to be more understanding. We've got to be more, Yes, I know. You're going to hell. I get it. It's a horror. It's a disgrace. What can fix it? What can revive the island of song and story? A lot of young people like you living the faith and doing their best to spread it. If you can find good priests, patronize them. Do your very, very best. And get to know your history best you can, especially your local history. See what local saints you had, and Patrick, Oh, the other thing is that a lot of the older shrines of Ireland are in Anglican hands. Don't be afraid to go into them and pray to the saint involved. Which reminds me, speaking of Ireland, something wonderful happened. Absolutely wonderful. About 10 years ago, or maybe a little less, the heart of St. Lawrence O'Toole was stolen from one of the two Anglican cathedrals, I think Christchurch in Dublin, where it was stolen. They got it back just in the past few months. And the Anglicans have put it in a shrine. But the point is, it's available for veneration once more. So make a pilgrimage to Dublin. Pray before the heart of St. Lawrence O'Toole that Ireland be freed of the horror and the misery that's overtaken her, and that she once again be the Emerald Isle, the Isle of saints and scholars, the legacy of St. Patrick, the land where Our Lady of Knock came. God save Ireland, cried the heroes. God save Ireland, cried them all. I will simply add to that. You can't help yourself, Mr. Lynch, being Irish, but the old saying, the Irish are a fey race. The Irish all are mad. For all their wars are happy, and all their songs are sad. Well, I don't know how true that is anymore, but as long as there's still men like you in Ireland, Mr. Lynch, she has a chance of becoming what she was. And so, with that, I guess that's the last of our questions and answers.
Yes.
Well, I would just say also, even though it makes me, it's not just Ireland, but Austria and France and England and all the countries of what were Christendom, including our own United States, that are under the shadow of the same hideous strength. And, dear friends, it's up to us to fight that hideous strength with whatever means at our disposal. And we shall win if we only stay true to this glorious quest. We shall win. Certainly as individuals, because this is how we'll earn our heaven. And possibly we'll win in this world. So with that,
yeah, were you going to say something? I'm sorry, Charles.
No, I was just going to say that if it's Monday,
it's off the menu.
And the soul you save
may be your own.
So with that, ladies and gents, Vinny and everybody in the building, my very, very best regards. And we'll see you next time.